Hi there, and welcome to this week's feedback session. So this is week 4, and this week we were looking at tonal, introducing tone into your drawings. So we covered quite a few exercises, including this gradient exercise, and I also talked about using them with both sort of landscape subjects, and also we had a look at doing a sort of removal technique with still life paintings. Anyway, I'm pleased to see I've had quite a bit handed in, so we'll just go through and I'll just try and make a few sort of points that might help the rest of you. Okay, so I thought I'd just pick out, everyone sent me in the tonal gradient, well, I received quite a few of them, and I've got this one by both Allisons. This is Allison Buso and this is Allison Mackay. And I just wanted to show you the problems is that often we will have a bit of a bias in our tonal work, and you can see Allison's here. This is Allison Buso. Hers are a bit heavy towards the mid values, okay? And if we look at the other Allisons here, these are a bit pale, okay? So you can see there's quite a difference. So even up to like 4 or 5 here, these are still very pale without much emphasis. So between say 0 and 10, what we're looking for is this smooth gradient, and some people will just weight the tones more towards the darks and some will weight them more towards the lights. So if you do get the chance to do this exercise again, maybe try it with a different medium, but also pay particular attention to this these steps and try to make sure that they're evenly distributed between light and dark. I think you'll be hard pressed to go beyond about 10 steps. That's what I found in the classes. And even then, you will probably get a couple of the steps which become very close to each other. But it's still something that's worth practicing every now and again. Okay. So then we've got another nice one here. This is Allison Buso. So I did one about landscape painting, and I used compressed charcoal and showed you a technique whereby you can sort of rub things out. And so I thought this one by Allison. Here's the reference photo. Okay, really nice reference. And what I talked about was the importance of simplicity in tone. Okay, and I think what Allison's done here is really nice. So she's darkened that sky, so the sky doesn't become the lights. The light source is actually, in this case, it's more like the buildings, okay? And we have quite a dark ground. Now, one thing I do suggest is on your phones or where you take your photographs, if you can play around with the brightness and the contrast, I quite like this. If you bring the brightness down, as I'm doing there, and the contrast up, this gives you some ideas about how you might push the tonal values. So in this case, what does it say? It says, well, why not make the ground almost like your darkest dark. Your ground is black, as is the shadow. Overall, the Martello Tower is a mid value, and then you have lights on the buildings and a sort of a slightly light sky. Okay, so bringing the ground down to a slightly darker tone. If we see there, okay. And actually, Allison has done something not dissimilar to that in her own interpretation of it. So I think that's really good. So the important thing is to try and see as simply as possible. Break your subject down, oversimplify it initially, and you'll create a stronger graphic statement. Okay. So we got this nice study by Leslie, and a sort of street scene. And there was something I liked about it. There are just a few things I'll show you though that she might want to consider. Okay, so as we can see, what's happening here is this road is coming up and round, okay? Now, if you remember our talk on vanishing points and perspective, these lines are converging up, which suggests that our eye level is going to be quite high. These would carry on up. So maybe the highest point of our eye level would be up here somewhere. So this gives us a feeling very much like we're looking down on these people, which again, you know, that's fine. So it's almost like we're looking out of a window. There's an implied perspective in the sort of heads of these people. I think they're waiting at this is a sort of crossing. And so their heads are on a diagonal like that. And there's something that feels to me like there's a sort of perspective implied there between their feet, which takes us to a vanishing point here, which isn't quite in keeping with the vanishing point of the road. So that's a rather sort of subtle point, but one just to be aware of. Okay, the other thing is the width of the road. So if we take our person here, okay, and that person's that tall, if this person was to lay flat on the ground, okay, they would reach halfway across the road, and that wouldn't be possible. Obviously that road would be too thin, okay? So when you draw people in perspective and you have things like roads or doors or something like this, it's good to just try to understand the scale. So in this case, I think if a road is this wide, if this was the middle of the road, say, you know, a person would probably be more like this sort of height. Something like that, I think. So yeah, I think probably, Leslie, you might just still want to, if you've done this from reference, try to get your ruler out, you know, like we did with the blocks, and just try to understand those vanishing points and the perspective a bit clearer. Having said all that, I think the use of tone and the mood of the drawing is very good. So I would encourage this. It looks like, I don't know whether it is toned paper, but the yellow chalk and the, you know, this glow coming from the lights is excellent, and maybe a possible painting there as well. So yeah, very good, Leslie, cheers. So then we have Sarah, who sent in this really nice drawing of a line of trees. Yeah, so I really like this. If we look at the reference material, so we can see here again, so let's just go, we'll desaturate it, okay, black and white, maybe increase the contrast a bit. So if we do that, we can really get those silver birches just to pop out. So they become lighter than the clouds. So I quite like that. I think, again, I'm always quite keen, if you can, just to increase the contrast. So what does that mean here? To me, it just suggests maybe if we darken some of these areas here, okay, so if I was to darken the sky a little bit, okay, and then maybe just go a little bit darker with these trees. Taking out more of that white. So if you can see, just by doing a bit of darkening like that, it creates a bit more visual impact. It means that these are very much the star of the show. So this is something I talk about in composition, is that you want really it to be very clear what your subject is, what's your primary interest. So by increasing the tonal contrast, we tend to focus the eye. It's like we're putting a spotlight on these trees, okay? So that's my suggestion there, is perhaps a little bit more contrast. Okay, Sarah, but thanks for that. I really like that drawing. I thought it was excellent. So let's go on to Stuart with a nice reference photograph there. Again, nice and tonal. Not so much mid-value, but and the sky is what you might call a bit burnt out in photography terms. So it's just a white sort of mass. But he's done a very nice little study of it there. So let's just flick back and forth. Okay. And you can see the lights of the church have been burnt out as well, so we see a bit less detail there. So again, similar idea. If I was going to suggest something, it would be increase the tonal contrast, and I would do that by maybe just darkening this path slightly. Okay, we darken that path, and maybe we could even darken the sky a little bit more. So they all become mid-value. And then what does that mean? It means our attention is definitely kept on the church, is that becomes, that really glows. Another thing is, so if the light is in the church, you almost don't want those heavy darks there, okay? I'm just going to lighten these a little bit, okay? Like those strong darks. And lightening those would give the feeling of it glowing, okay? So in an area that's illuminated and light, even the darks in that area become sort of infused with some of that light and create that feeling of that area sort of glowing, okay? So that's how I might improve on that one. Lindsay sent this one in. This is sort of inspired by Lindsay's very keen on the Scottish colourists. I think this might have been one of theirs, and she's done a painting before of this group of houses. Now I don't know whether it's in the photograph or how she's done this. The only thing that's suggesting here is the houses could do with a little bit more tonal contrast as well, just to explain how the lights come in. So remember I was saying about how you need to understand where the lights come in from, and you need to sort of almost explain that. So if I was just to darken that side of the building, okay, so by doing that, it's much clearer where that light is coming from. And that just gives a bit more form. So you don't want to overdo it, again, because it's an illuminated, the house is white, so you perhaps don't want to make the shadows quite as heavy as that. But yeah, just use the light source to illuminate the form. That's what I'd suggest there, but that's very nice, Lindsay. So Alison Mackay sent in this still life arrangement. Yeah, so that was landscape. So now we've got a few still lifes. Okay, and so we can see we've got highlights on the top here. And so the only thing with this arrangement is we're not getting a great deal of reflected light. And that makes it makes our job of explaining the form a little bit harder. So again, what I'm going to do is desaturate it. So we'll go to black and white. Okay, and then increase the contrast. Brightness down, contrast up. Okay, so that really makes it ideal for drawing. Okay, so if we look at that, if we hold that in our mind's eye and then go across to Alison's drawing, we can see that overall it's quite pale. So she could have got a bit more interest through increasing the darks. So I think she's got the lights are very much in the right sort of spots. But what I would be looking to do is, so the light comes in, it's almost like that's all in shadow. Okay, that's in shadow. There's a bit of shadow there. Right, shadow from the side, shadow from the side. Okay, cast shadow going off in that direction. Again, you've got to keep the shadows consistent. Okay, so darkening those, it makes the highlights pop out a bit more. The other thing it's good to do is to use the darks around the object. and that will also make the highlights pop out. So I still think maybe there's a little bit more work to do there in terms of what I would do is, if I was going to set up again, maybe take a photograph, put it on your phone and try to look at it through this black and white lens. You can see there's just some nice things happening here. So like, I just draw on here. Okay, so the highlight there, you know, it comes to the side, we get this cast shadow coming off in that direction. This form, the jug, okay, so this plane is all in shadow, okay, so is this plane. And so that reinforces the idea that this is a separate, this is like the lip, okay, so there's a tonal difference there, and that helps to understand that. There's also the direction of the shadows. This one is coming that way, this one is coming that way. So that helps us to understand the light source basically sort of coming from roughly in that direction. Okay, there's a little bit of reflected light here, okay? There's none on the apple and none on the jug. So again, I would just perhaps try and set it up, maybe do it at night, close the curtains and just use a lamp, and that might help with the setting up a better arrangement. But yeah, it's, you know, the main thing is you're doing it, and you know, keep going. I think the white chalk works well. And Debbie sent this in, and I really like this. I think it's a great little sketch, presumably of an ornament of some description. You know, there's a little bit, what she's done though is she's basically used the rubber like a pencil, okay, and so what that means is that she's actually drawn the shadows, okay, so instead of removing the lights, okay, so if you remove the lights like this with the rubber, then you would leave the shadow like that. So if I do that there, you'd leave the shadow. Okay, so you have to sort of try to reverse your thinking. I know it's difficult, but you can also practice it with black paper. But having said all that, I still really liked it as a drawing. It's you know, it's quite good fun, and yeah, so I like that. Thanks, Debbie. So we got here. This is Jen sent this in. Again, very nice study of a still life. And let's have a look. So here we can start to see some of the points I was making. So let's see if we can identify so we've got the highlight, okay? Highlight, mid-tones. Okay, core of the shadow, reflected light coming up there. So again, highlight there. No core of the shadow there. So that, you know, if there was one, it might have been, again, different lighting situations, it will become more obvious, but you would have something like a core of the shadow there. So maybe a core of the shadow there with a little bit of reflected light coming into that, the bird there, okay? The ground works well. I think the background works well. And as I rubbed that one, when I'm looking at it, I'm getting the sense it might be that paper though that makes it quite hard to rub out. I say some papers are like that, so you might want to experiment with that. But it's a very nice little study. So thanks, Jen. And Teresa. Yep, Teresa sent this in. So again, great study, and we've got sort of quite clear on this one. We've got a highlight there and a highlight there. Sorry, that red's a bit harsh, but then we've got the mid values coming round the form, okay, into the core of the shadow down there, and then reflected light on the base there, and our cast shadow. And you can see she's got a really nice gradient there of the cast shadow. So that's really, really nice, Teresa. The white page, if you look in nature, often it's very rare to find a completely flat white page. You'll probably, if you look close enough, you'll probably find some very subtle gradient, okay? So what's quite nice is, if we use, so that is very subtle. But what I would do is I would leave the lightest bit of the paper sort of down on that corner, okay? It's like here. Actually, if we made that a little bit darker, then that gives us the opportunity to, sorry, you could then lighten that stalk. Lighten the stalk against the slightly darkened paper. Sometimes you get a little bit of a highlight on the edge there, okay? So yeah, you would have I would have my highlight maybe here, I'm exaggerating it there, and maybe there, okay? And again, it's like I was saying about contrast, and it helps just to pull the eye in towards our interest, okay? But that's really nice, Teresa, so thanks for that. Okay, so this is Margaret from Felixstowe, and again, nice study. I liked that she has she's done what I suggested, which was she's created a bit of light around the highlight area, and I think that's worked really nicely. Things that do suggest themselves is maybe, you know, a little bit of a highlight on this apple might have made that pop out, maybe a little one there just to suggest the form as three-dimensional. The ellipse is a little bit pointy, but it's going to be, so you see it's a bit like an eye. So again, just work on that smoothness, keep doing the circles when you get your ellipse in. If the light is coming this way, okay, it will catch the inside of this jug here and create a nice little sort of, it's like a counter, so you get that colour there. Okay, and then a slightly darker colour there. Just dark as that. Like so. Okay. Compositionally, if I was going to suggest something, this is slightly, I wouldn't have the object sitting on the bottom of the drawing, okay? It's nice, you always want to create a bit of space. If you have the object sitting on the bottom of the page, I say it destroys the feeling of depth. We need to sort of see a bit of ground in front of the object, and it makes us feel that we're looking in at them. So that's just a compositional thing you might want to bear in mind. And here's Maria Jose sent this in, and I think you'll agree this is an excellent study. Really making great use of the toned paper, and almost like this, it's somewhere between painting and drawing, you can see, with this rich sort of toned paper. So the feedback I gave Maria Jose on this one was really, she needs to perhaps consider being a little bit, it's a bit heavy with the white, okay? So you need to sort of develop it. Once you get going with the white chalk, it can be difficult to know when to stop. But remember when we did our tonal scale, white was at the very end, okay? And so you really want to reserve white for just the few little highlights. I think where she's putting these little sparkles is, that's exactly the sort of thing. But I think here, you see, this is a chrome, this looks to me like the base of a lamp, so this is chrome. So the highlight there is going to be reflecting the light source almost exactly, so that's going to be very light. This highlight here coming back here, that's going to be light hitting a surface that's falling away from us. So it probably wouldn't be quite as light as the main highlights. So it's just that, it's what happens when you've got the white chalk and you're enjoying yourself and you end up putting white chalk on everything, okay? But other than that, I think it's a really nice study. So thanks for that, Maria Jose. And Okay, so Lois sent this one in. Again, this looks like it. So this is the removal technique, and I really like what she's done here. I think the forms are definitely emerging, and she hasn't been too heavy with the removal. It's got a nice, really nice textured feel. And on the toned paper, it looks quite, I like it. It's sort of almost like old-fashioned. The only thing I would suggest, and it could be just the photograph, is again just the contrast. So if I darken the darks and lighten the lights, you see how it sort of pops out a bit more. So it's when you're working with charcoal, basically the more you work into it, the more you will lighten your drawing, and you want to keep the darks really nice and rich. So just make sure you go in very heavy at the beginning, and that will help. Okay, but I thought that was a really nice study. And lastly, we've got a study by Sarah, which is really good. So again, let's look at this black and white. So the color, it can just sort of affect our perception. Okay, so that's why I try to take the color out. Okay, so you can see it's quite mid-value. So we've got the dark of the sort of stems of the tulips there and some highlights. So it's another one that would probably benefit from an increase in the contrast. Okay, you see there, it's going to make everything pop out. And this is how she got on with it. So working on toned paper. Okay, and yeah, a really nice study. I think what we could say though is, if we look at these tulips up here, you can see how much the highlight, I know they're slightly pixelated, but you can see how the highlight of these tulips reads against the mid value of the background. Okay, and in Sarah's drawing, somehow even the toned paper isn't quite working as a mid value. Okay, and it might be the chalks picking up some of that charcoal, but you just really want to make sure that your highlights have got something to work against. Okay, so that often can involve sort of darkening the background or something like that. Okay, but I really liked it. Nice study, and she hasn't overdone it with the white, which is excellent. She's got some white chalk down at the bottom there. Yeah, so that's where I'd be putting my highlight, is at the bottom of the vase. Okay, and I'm just saying that she's got that there, but somehow you don't need this extra white at the side, because it sort of starts to compete with where your interest is. So this is where sometimes you have to sort of think what's going to be best for the image and not necessarily how it looks in life. Okay, so yeah, use your highlights to draw attention to things that you're interested in. Anyway, so that's it for this week. I hope you found some of that useful. I'd say these tonal exercises, you know, there were some suggestions this week, but hopefully these are going to be things that you will return to again and again. And it's nice to see some of you using charcoal. I really like to work tonally, and hopefully it will give you some ideas to move forwards with. Anyway, so thanks a lot, and I'll see you again next week. So bye.